From the Portland Sports Arena, this is Portland Wrestling. Hello, once again, Frank Montema here. Glad to have you with us, and we're going to have a lot of action for you tonight, in the interviews, so forth, going on. First, I want to tell you something that I really hate to do, but it happened, and I think it's old. You know, last week that Buddy Rose was up here, and during his interview earlier in the middle of the show somewhere, he predicted, along with everybody else in the country, he made a prediction about Dallas and said Sue Ellen, psychiatrist, had done it. Well, I've got to say that at the end of the show,
The history of wrestling in Portland, Oregon has been well told and well documented. Don Owens' Pacific Northwest Wrestling was a healthy, vibrant satellite territory of the National Wrestling Alliance, the wrestling territory cooperative which would, in the late 80s, transform into the Atlanta, Georgia-based World Championship Wrestling. Of course, in the mid-1980s, one Vincent Kennedy McMahon would take his World Wrestling Federation national, changing the territory system forever. But after McMahon went national, Pacific Northwest Wrestling would continue to operate under Don Owens' guiding hand for almost a decade, bringing in nationally known stars such as Andre the Giant, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, Superfly Jimmy Snuka, the future Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig, Rowdy Roddy Piper, who was also the territory's booker for a time, and of course Scott Levy, who worked in Portland as Scotty the Body, but is probably better known as Scotty Flamingo, Johnny Polo, and Raven in WWF, WCW, and ECW. Now, each of these men worked with longtime local mainstays who had seen less national success, but were nevertheless beloved local characters. Men like Steve Dahl and Rex King, the Southern Rockers here in Portland, but perhaps better known nationally as Well Done in WWF, Al Madrill, and of course local legend, the original grappler himself, Len Denton. Now, a lesser-known aspect of this history is the place where all the wrestlers lived when they went to work in Portland, which, for many, if not most of them, was the exact same place. The Bomber Cafe's unassuming exterior belies its near century of remarkable history, both wrestling-related and otherwise. It is undeniably the sort of place where you wish the walls could talk. Today, the Bomber is tucked away behind a Fred Meyer gas station and a local coffee stand on a stretch of McLaughlin Boulevard in Milwaukee, Oregon. For most of the latter half of the 20th century, however, the Bomber was visible from quite a distance, as passersby couldn't possibly miss the giant freaking B-17 bomber positioned atop the gas pumps out front. And yes, that picture is real. The founder of the Bomber was a man called Art Lacey. Lacey seems as if he had the exact right mix of madman and genius to be an excellent wrestling promoter, had he chosen another path in life. At his birthday party in 1947, Lacey had one friend bet him that there was no way he could pull off his mad idea of putting a B-17 on top of his gas station. So they put $5 on it. Now, Lacey immediately turned to another friend and asked him for the $15,000. Note, that is about $1/5 in today's money, and asked if he could borrow the money from this friend. According to Lacey's daughter, Punky Scott, this friend had the money on his person and loaned it to him immediately. So Lacey heads out to Oklahoma and talks an Air Force commander into selling him a B-17. Now, this Air Force commander didn't check first to see whether Lacey could fly a B-17, which of course he could not. Not only could Lacey not fly a B-17, evidently they are intended to be flown with a co-pilot. So the resourceful, perhaps slightly mad Art Lacey dresses up a mannequin as his co-pilot and teaches himself how to fly a goddamned B-17, because that's a normal thing that restaurants/gas station/hotel owners do. Suffice to say, this didn't work so well, so Lacey called up some pilot buddies from home, had them bring over some whiskey to bribe the fire department, and soon enough they were on their way back to Oregon. Now, the part I don't know exactly is how the Bomber Motel came to be a home away from home for visiting wrestlers. But that home away from home it did become. Perhaps they sensed a kindred spirit in the slightly mad attitude of Art Lacey, being slightly mad themselves, as anyone must be to try to make it in the wrestling business. A good friend of mine and I went and had lunch at the Bomber recently, and we met Art Lacey's daughter, Punky Scott. She was working, so she only had a minute to speak with us, but in that minute she told us a few of the funniest stories I had ever heard. some related to wrestling, some related to her father, Art Lacey. Now, the same friend's grandfather lived in the motel apartments behind the Bomber, the very same ones where most of the wrestlers stayed when they were in Portland. He remembers going over to visit his grandfather and seeing Scott Levy and Brian Adams, perhaps better known in the WWF as Demolition Crush, hanging around outside of Alma Drill's house in the late 80s. But don't take my word for it. Here's Levy himself describing the Bomber motel.
And then I went and got the place where all the boys always lived for years was a weekly rental motel called the Bomber. And it had a bomber airplane parked in up on a pedestal up on a thing, on a pole. And it was a real bomber airplane. And it was like a semicircle. It's like a half circle. So you drive in and you could circle it. And
till next time, this is the world-renowned historian Kev. Out.